Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. We're grateful to have you with us, and we're excited to be into the Sermon on the Plain, which I've always found just to have a little bit less of an exciting name than Sermon on the Mount.
A little less gravitas.
Feels that way. But in some ways, like Luke is doing some really, really specific theological, intentional moves here with how he lays out this teaching. And at some point, probably not today, but in one of these podcasts or maybe an extra podcast, we will talk about whether these two sermons are even the same. Like, is Matthew and Luke, are they recounting for us the exact same moment? Are these collections of Jesus's teachings that both have incorporated into one event? Are they teachings that were common to Jesus's sort of catalog of teachings that he gave many different places in similar fashion? Like, how do you understand plain, flat place versus mount? All of that. Those are all great questions.
Or was it a plane on a mount?
Exactly, like a plateau. Those are all great questions that we're not going to get to today. So sorry to just throw those all out there.
Come back later.
Come back for another episode. What we are going to get to today is Luke's iteration of the Beatitudes and Jesus's teaching on the good life, kingdom life, life inside the kingdom. And we've got questions from our community Bible study, which launched this past week on Wednesday. We've got questions that, you and I have been thinking through, and some questions from Sunday. So there's lots of questions. Might be more rapid fire.
Yes. Yeah. We'll try to keep them brief so that we can touch on a bunch of them. But this is a hard passage. Like it is difficult. And I actually left Sunday morning. It was Mother's Day. And so I had to run and just do a bunch of stuff for our moms, between my mom and my wife's mom. So it was like busy, but as I was leaving the church service, I felt like a weightiness to this passage as it relates to how we as modern, Western, generally wealthy people live. And that's been sitting with me even this morning. But there's other parts of the passages as well that I think that are not relating to necessarily wealth or possessions that are worth just exploring, and we're going to get to that. But maybe the first question is as it relates to being very rich or very poor. So Jesus highlights, he says, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you'll be satisfied." So those two are very tangible. And then the kind of the turnaround for the woes. Woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. So there's a clear kind of have and have not kind of situation going on here. And the question, I think this was a question relating from community Bible study from last Wednesday night. And it's like, okay, let's talk about middle ground here. These are fairly extreme positions, and or at least the Jesus calling a person blessed because they are poor and because they are hungry. It's challenging to sit with that and grapple with that and be like, okay, is there a happy medium here? And even the question feels a little silly in some ways, because I'm like, Jesus isn't always about happy mediums.
Right.
So, but just like as fodder for discussion, is there a happy medium here?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I agree with you. It feels a little bit silly, maybe. Like you already almost know, even as you're asking it, you're like, like, why are we even here? But I do think there's like a functional reality to living in Canada in 2025 that, there's a responsibility. I think like you and I are part of families with kids. And so there's a weightiness to being a parent and wanting to put a roof over your kid's head. And, there are financial responsibilities and requirements to living, like I said, in Canada in 2025 that are just make it difficult to enter into this kind of passage, right? I think that I wonder if we wrestle that tension out, right? Like it less so like, is there a happy medium or middle ground? Because I think as soon as we, at least I speak for myself, as soon as I want to look for the happy medium, I know I'm going to err in the wrong direction.
Yes.
Like, if financially, it's just happy. What is happy medium for me is exceptionally more wealthy than, vast numbers of people on this planet. And that's a hard reality to sit with, while also feeling like the price of groceries are going up. And the cost of living, like of rent or mortgage, is increasing, and people's ability to get into a house is becoming, less. It's harder to do that. So we live in this tension of life costs a certain amount to live where we live, and add to that the weight of responsibility together. If you have a family, or if you're caring for someone, if you're taking care of a parent, like all of that adds financial weight and responsibility. So we're not saying sell everything and move to the desert. Like I don't think that's the logical sort of implication, or I don't think even what Jesus is advocating for here. Some of the language that I've tried to, and I didn't use this in the sermon specifically, but in our community Bible study teaching team prep, I said, like, in no uncertain terms, I want people wrestling with the question, should I take that second vacation? Do I need that second car? Like, how much are we going to spend on luxury or leisure?
Yep.
I want people asking those difficult questions, because I think that's the place where, I did say this in the sermon, that like, if you have two vehicles in your driveway, if you can wake up in the morning and choose one vehicle over another, or if you can choose to have one vehicle or two vehicles. So like, we have one vehicle, but it's a choice. But that's a conscious choice that we've made.
Yes.
To have one vehicle, not it's not because we like how do I say, like, it's not good for us. We have one vehicle. Like, it's a choice. We've made that choice. If you've made that choice, like, that just puts you in a different economic bracket. And I want people wrestling those choices out. What is financial need? What is financial want? What is a needed expense? And what is a desired expense? Because I stink at this. Yeah. Right. And even in my language, I need to be challenged by this one. What is a legitimate need, and what is a desire? What would be nice, but is not necessarily needed? And then what's just straight up, I want this because it's nice or cool or new or etc.
We are wrestling with this huge, and so I think it's good. It feels vulnerable a little bit to share like personal examples, but I think it's actually what we ought to do, because otherwise we can sort of tend toward, as you talked about, kind of over spiritualizing this. And almost like using that as a way to sort of placate our own stuff, right? So like, I want to like maybe unpack a way that my wife and I are working this through right now. Is that we have a home. We've been there 11 years. It's not a big home, but for the three of us and our cat, it suits our needs in many, many ways. And less so in some other ways. And so we've been wrestling for the past kind of couple of years of like, okay, do we want to maybe do a little renovation to make it, a bit more what we want? Or do we look elsewhere, and it would probably mean a little increase in our mortgage or whatever, which, like, we bought a home at the right time before things went crazy, and we feel very fortunate We didn't do anything. Like that was just like the market at the time, right? But like we are actively wrestling with these needs and wants, and it's hard because they can get very confused, you know, because it often boils down to we need more room for our stuff.
Right.
Like which then I think for me, so it makes me feel, you know, I end up feeling like conflicted.
Yeah.
But also just genuinely our room is so small, it's hard to fit like even a closet, you know, like an extra closet for clothing.
Right.
So it's this tension, and we're just wrestling out in real time.
So like I thank you for sharing that, because I think that's you're right. Like that is the real life that we ought to be living shoulder to shoulder, where you're just like, you're bumping into people, you're wrestling this stuff out together.
Or because like we could use, you know, a lot of that extra money that would go into renovation or increase in the mortgage. We could be exceptionally generous with that money and do other things with it for, you know, others other than ourselves. Right.
Yeah. So I think the thing that I want people taking away from this is exactly what you're doing. So a couple things. You said you've been wrestling this out, thinking, praying through it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
So I just want to name that. Like, I think that in and of itself is a slowed down kingdom. What does love require of us kind of method to making a decision. So it's not rash. You've been wrestling with it for a number of years. You're not, you know, to my knowledge at this point, you've not made a decision.
No.
So this isn't like you felt a perceived need and then immediately looked for a way to meet that need, and then made the decision in fairly rapid succession based on your felt need without taking time to separate those things. So you're feeling a need and wrestling through genuinely, like, is this a need? Is this a want? Is this wise? Is this unwise? What is the better part of wisdom? If we're going to, like, A, B, C are options, praying through all of that, I think that's actually a good demonstration of what this passage calls us to do, which is to lay that decision down and say, all right, Jesus, like, what would you have us do? And then to be honest and vulnerable enough to bring others in and start saying, like, does this make sense? Like, help us make this decision. And
listener, what do we do?
Less that. No, less that. I'm gonna look at the camera. But like, what I would love for everybody to have is that sort of community-based decision-making mindset, so that it would be natural to go to like another couple who are maybe 10 years down the road, be like, hey, these are our options. Like, input into that for us. Help us with it. Help us think through it and pray through it. And here's what we're wrestling with. Like, that's the piece. So Jesus calls us to abandon the pursuit of wealth and money and success and applause and like all of the things. But, you know, we're talking about money. So to abandon the pursuit of money for pursuit of the kingdom. Yeah. You can use money inside of the kingdom, right? It's a lot harder. There's something about it. The pull. And like, I know a lot of people say like, well, money is neutral. It's just a tool. And I go, maybe in a vacuum, theologically, I would agree, but not inside of the course of human history, because it's never just about money. It's about what it plays on our desire and want and greed and wealth, success and fame, and like all of these things. So yes, maybe it is a neutral tool in a vacuum, but I don't think that that's the way Jesus actually talks about it, as being in a vacuum. It's harder. He says it's harder. It's harder to deal with that and live life inside the kingdom. Yeah. It's hard to be wealthy and also live fully inside the kingdom, because it requires surrender and even surrendering our money. So I think it's worth naming that, like, I like, take the vacation, build that into your rhythm of rest as a family, but wrestle it out
Yeah.
Where do you need to go? How far? What are you going to spend? What percentage? All of that. Have that honest conversation and say, all right, does this fit with how we want to live inside the kingdom? And if it does, great. But the only other thing I would say is include some other people in there.
Yeah.
Because again, like, I mean, I can start to convince myself if I buy this, I could use it this way, like inside, but use it for ministry, do this and that. Like you can start to justify things pretty quickly when you play that game just with yourself in your own mind. So that's where accountability is. Really, really short story. My first church, long before we got there, they were building a new building. They were falling out of their old building. And maybe I've told this story on here before. I think I've told it to you, but if I have, sorry, it's a good story to hear twice. They were falling out of their old building, and there was a family who came, and they had sold their cottage to help fund the build on the new building.
Dang.
Yep.
Like, and I mean, that is a big, I don't want to say the word sacrifice, because if they're selling a cottage, that means they have a home.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not selling their home.
Right.
I mean, it's very generous. And also it came out of their wealth, and it's significant. And yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things you don't want to undermine it, but man, like those are the decisions we should be asking.
That's a sacrifice that I think people can feel. Be like, oh, yeah. It comes from asking this question: what is enough?
Yeah.
What is enough? And genuinely being able to wrestle that out in terms of your life and lifestyle and the lifestyle Jesus calls us to live. What is enough? What is enough for me and for my family? And what am I going to do beyond that? How am I going to be generous and abundantly so?
Yeah.
So I think too few of us have that honest conversation to really wrestle out what is enough. And it's that's an uncomfortable thing to ask of yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that's the question, right? So is there a middle ground? I think maybe if I could sum up, I almost feel like it's an interesting question to ask, but it's the wrong question. It's the wrong approach.
Yeah.
Because it's not a middle ground between my pursuit of wealth and my pursuit of the kingdom.
Those are mutually exclusive.
So there can't be a middle ground. Is there a middle ground between rich and poor? Again, I think Jesus says it's harder to be rich and enter the kingdom. And so, for many of us, and I won't say for everybody, because I don't know the financial realities of everybody, but I say for many of us in Canada in 2025, we tip more toward wealthy. Yeah. So I think we need to be,
in spite of some of the economical challenges that are, yes.
Yep. So I just think it's important to start knowing globally where we tip. Yeah. And then it has everything to do with surrender. Jesus says, leave everything, follow me, abandon all, forsake all, and follow me. And so you got to be willing to leave. Like the fishermen left their catch of a lifetime of fish. Hopefully it went to good use, right? We talked about that on the week. Like hopefully it wasn't wasted.
Yeah.
But they left what was perceived to be abundance for life inside the kingdom.
Yes. So maybe rather than a middle ground between very rich and very poor, we need to be looking at like we need this is a third path. And the third path is that we bring everything at the feet of Jesus.
Yep.
And say it's all yours. Yep. What does that require of us?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to recognize that the more we have, the harder it is to open our hands and say, here's the more.
Yeah.
But I think that's the call. It's surrender and it's open-handedness. Being willing to move slowly.
So we got a question in our questions at courtrightchurch.org email.
Nice plug. Yep.
This is a good one. Okay, so later on in, I think it's verse 22, it says, "Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man." And the person asks, what do we do when people use that particular passage as a way to defend themselves when people call them out on behaving poorly?
You're persecuting me.
Yeah. Well, and we've seen a lot of that over the years. I would say, especially in kind of the Western North American church, which has historically had very little, if any, persecution of any kind. But also, I think it goes deeper than that, because I think that there are some genuinely concerning things that we could and should talk about. But I think more on an individual level. On an individual level, someone in a church or a pastor or a leader of some kind behaves poorly, and then when they're getting flack for it, they receive it as, well, I'm blessed because people are hating me. Which
I like another way to put it, I think, is to say that we can play the hating, reviling, persecuting, whatever language you want to use, like the card, to avoid accountability.
Yes,
that is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So you don't want to deal with your stuff, or you don't like how this is going. You don't want to be confronted. Yeah. And so you say, no, you're persecuting me. And instead of honestly saying, what do I need to learn in this moment? We say, no, blanket statement, that is persecution, that is hatred. I don't need to listen to it. And I'm going to continue on my merry way. So, yeah, I think we are not good at, be it, confronting our own stuff, or being honest, or being held accountable feels particularly uncomfortable. Yeah. And so we can do that. Now, here's my... I think we all have this tendency to do it a little bit. So I think, I'd be careful I just think we need to see this tendency in ourselves as well as in others. And it's just another instance where we can see somebody else doing it and not be willing to confront our own, like, why does this bother me so much that anyways, there's an endless cycle there that you can kind of go into. But for me, it's blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you. There's no period there. It's on account of the Son of Man. And
yeah, the sentence isn't finished.
The sentence isn't finished. It's not just blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude you and revile you and defame you because you are a Christian. It's like on account of the Son of Man. It's on account of who Jesus is and what Jesus does and how Jesus lives. And the message. So what sorry to cut you off. What Jesus has just said to the disciples is, you are now, he's named them apostles. It's like, you will be sent out as my messengers on my behalf with my authority to proclaim this gospel, right? And as you go proclaiming that gospel, living it out, like in real, tangible, practical ways, people are going to hate you because of it. Yeah. It's not because of you, it's because of me. So blessed are you. This isn't like, blessed are you because you're a Christian and you made a bad decision, or you made you're a Christian, but actually like you're really judgmental, and you're like, well, I'm just speaking the truth in love. No, you're speaking the truth rudely. Like,
I've seen this so much.
This isn't it's not a catch-all that we can just, well, I'm a Christian and it must be because I'm a Christian that you don't like me. No, like there's a chance actually that there's something that needs to change in my life. Like I did something wrong and need to own that. So I'm hesitant. I'm really hesitant when Christians play the persecuted card. And I'll just keep it to our own context, okay? Our city, our province, our country. I see a lot of division based on religion, and certainly, hatred and like vile things being thrown all over the place. So between Christian and non-Christian, going both ways.
Yes.
Christian and Christian, different denominations, different flavors, different whatever. Like, yes, there's a lot of that, but the persecution piece, I think if your default is to jump to that place when you're confronted by something, then that's saying more about you than it is about them. And you need to listen to that.
There's a little bit of a, and I'm going to say this gently but firmly. I think some of it is like a little bit of thin skin. And I say that as someone who is thin-skinned in other ways. I will let things get to me. But yeah, when it comes to persecution, and when it comes to that being our default mode, when someone is expressing hatred toward us, it's because, it's just because I'm a Christian, right? Rather than reflecting internally. That may be that there is some inner work to do in your soul to know that I am secure in who I am in Jesus, and I don't need to let that rattle me, and I don't need to let that get to me. However, I could imagine a situation where someone is actually genuinely reflecting, and they're looking at like a situation where they're experiencing hatred, they're experiencing a challenging situation, and they're genuinely being like, I don't know if I've done anything wrong here. I don't know if is this just because they dislike me as a Christian for what I believe? I've never been in that situation. I've always tried to, I interact with the folks, at my child's school, and people that from very different walks of life know I'm a pastor, know I'm a Christian. They would deeply disagree with me on a number of things. Yeah. I've never experienced hatred from them because I try not to be a jerk. And I try to be loving, and I try to be, as gracious as I can, that they are not Christians. But there could be someone who is really wrestling with it. They're wrestling it out. They're trying to figure out, okay, am I being, targeted in some way? Maybe. Is there something going on inside me that I need to wrestle with? And I think the danger is allowing yourself to do that in a silo.
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
Isolation. And so bringing, as we've said for the first piece, bringing community into this, and saying like, and don't just like go to your people that are gonna, tell you everything you want to hear. Like go to people that are going to be truthful with you, and say like, hey, I'm encountering this. Am I being the jerk, or like, is there something else going on here? Am I being targeted?
Yeah. I think even just to learn to have a curious spirit is and will be one of the greatest gifts of your life.
About ourselves and looking inwardly and
I think in general, right? Like, where when I'm at my worst is when I'm defensive. Yeah. Right? Like if I choose to take or am finding myself taking a defensive posture in relationship, that is when I know, like that's when I'm at my worst. And that's me. Like that's not necessarily everybody. I think in those moments when my brain and my body is saying like batten down the hatches and like, right? Like put the walls up. the task for me in relationship is to learn to ask more questions and to remain curious. Tell me more. Help me understand where you're coming from. Help me see me through your eyes. Help me to understand more. Now, obviously there are situations where, I don't need to be curious. Like if somebody walks up, the street and takes a swing at me with a hockey stick for some reason, I probably don't need to be curious. That's never happened, by the way.
Panthers fan.
Yeah. I just was trying to pick a obvious but also weird enough, situation that, I'm not making anybody have
Like, so as they're swinging, you're not going to be like,
tell me more about this.
What's brought you to this moment?
No, I should probably be defensive.
Yeah.
Like arms up. Here we go. Like I'm gonna actually try to like block the like. There's a little bit of defensiveness that is good, right?
Yes.
But I think in relationship, I know that for me, the antidote to the defensiveness is curiosity, and I think curiosity is an antidote to so many. To cynicism and bitterness and these things that I think we naturally just wall ourselves with. And so curious, if you can be curious, it's great because it'll help you see yourself differently when you don't need to, and then you got confirmation and when you do need to. But that only happens inside of good community. You got to have your people, like you've said, you can walk to and say, help me see this in the way I need to.
That would, in my estimation, and I'm speaking very much to myself because I can be very quick to jump to judgment and accusation in my heart. I don't always verbalize that, but in my heart. So, okay. But I think that would solve if we could approach life that way. And you even see Jesus. Jesus asks a lot of questions, right? Yeah. Masterful in that way. But you could, I think some of our political divide, our religious divide, it's not all going to be solved by being, by asking questions but it's I think a lot of the intensity and the extreme tensions that we're facing these days. I think a lot of that would dissipate if we all sought to understand one another. Again, does not work in every circumstance. There are some times where someone is just doing a bad thing and we just need to call it out. Yep. That is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about your average Joe who leans one way or the other on a political spectrum or theological perspective or whatever, right? Yeah.
So I think like anything, on this question, like the quicker we are to rule something out and dismiss it, the worse off we'll be. There's certain things just absolutely, like, somebody might level an accusation that is completely unfounded and needs to be dismissed. Yeah. But even to do that rashly and just with a kind of almost like the wave of a hand, be like, that's persecution. Like if it feels like dismissing things, it at the end of the day does more harm to ourselves, and then by virtue of that to others long term, than it would to at least consider. So no, I think there's a right way to approach that. Obviously, in community is going to be one of the continuous
curiosity, community. We need another C. That could be a Baptist sermon.
Contemplation.
Contemplation. Yes, that's perfect.
I mean, like, I think that's a good. I think that's a good approach to it.
Yeah. That's great. So one other thought that came out as we look at this passage, when you go to the latter, so I guess verse 21 and then the corresponding verse Oh, where is it in the woes? Maybe it's not mentioned in the woes. The part about laughter.
Mm-hmm.
So, blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Oh yeah, sorry, that is end of 25. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. So, laughter, I like to laugh. Laughter is good. Generally speaking.
Yeah.
What's going on here? Why is laughter seen as bad?
There are a number of different ways to answer this. Let me just take two, hopefully briefly. Number one, I think that there's some truth to what we experience inside of life, which is all of life, the fullness of life does include grief and mourning. And learning to do that really does change your approach to life. Learning to mourn well, learning to grieve well, learning to do that as an individual and inside of community, that matters. And there is a wisdom and even just gravitas to someone who has sat in the depths of sadness and sorrow and moved through it to experience joy on the other side. So there's nothing worse than, I think, than a funeral that doesn't name death and doesn't name sadness and grief and mourning. There are, the psalmist writes, like the shadow of the valley of death, like deepest, darkest valleys, moments of life. So I think there's just, to some degree, truth to this statement that there is a blessedness to moving through seasons of mourning and sadness and sorrow toward joy, what I would call joy on the other side. And to be very clear, not just happiness. I had a quote, and I think I cut it from the sermon. But Augustine said, "Crying is a requirement, laughter the reward of wisdom."
That feels like it's like right lined up with this passage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So crying is a requirement, laughter is the reward of wisdom. And then he continues, Luke wrote laughter to mean joy. So that's his take on it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It is that those who mourn will receive and know and experience joy, and you will move through that. There's an ability, like there's a gift of God to do that, and you won't feel it. You certainly won't feel it in the moment. It's going to take time. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to look like what you want it to look like. It's not going to feel great. Certainly immediately, but there's just a movement here that God walks us through. So that's one way to answer this question. The other way, and I think more so on the woe side, where he says, "Woe to you who laugh now, for you're going to mourn." You're like, "Oh, that sounds a little vindictive." I think there's another approach to this that says the type of laughter matters also.
Yeah.
And so those who grieve now are going to be moved toward joy. The laughing now is almost, if we consider it the inverse of that, it's like those who laugh when others mourn. Those who laugh in seasons where it is right to mourn. Those who don't grieve, but instead laugh. And I would even maybe extend it to say, poke fun at, or even celebrate, or laugh at other people's misfortune. You are going to grieve in the long run. That's going to lead away from life. So the type of laughter matters. The reward laughter is not the same as the woe laughter. The blessing laughter, is not the same qualitatively as the woe laughter is. The woe laughter is like vengeful, and it is mean and evil and driven against the other. I'm going to laugh at your misfortune. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to sit here and watch this all unfold. I'm going to watch like the whole thing burn, and I'm going to, sip my coffee or eat my popcorn and just watch it, right? You get those sort of
pride,
memes, and
there's a pride element.
Yeah.
The thing that I think I compared it with you last week is it makes me think about, this is, so for those who use Facebook, which is often the bad place, you see on like lots of posts that are not meant to be funny, people using like the laugh react. And on posts that are maybe, from, a particular theological or political persuasion, or even just someone talking about some misfortune they face in their life, and you see someone laugh reacting, and it's like, man, why are you doing that? That's kind of rude. And it, that was just a very like practical. I'm like, man, people have weaponized the laugh react.
Listen, apparently the thumbs up doesn't actually mean like thumbs up either. Like, hey, good
is
job.
It like sarcastic?
It's got like a sarcastic undertone to it. Yeah. So this is just what we do. It seems, but I think that's that's a great illustration of it. It is qualitatively different. The reward laughter is joy, and the woe laughter is vengeful, mean spirited.
Yeah.
I'm gonna enjoy watching you suffer.
Yeah.
And Jesus says one is going to lead to life and one is going to lead to death.
Yeah.
And that I think is pretty clear on it. So it's certainly an area where it's helpful to not always rely just on strict parallelism.
He's playing with the words.
He is.
Yeah, totally. And that the initial one about blessed are those who weep, for they will laugh. There are, I think, parallels you could draw with other parts of Scripture. I just pulled this up from Psalm 30, which says, "You turned my mourning into dancing. You peeled off my sackcloth and clothed me with joy." Exactly that parallel of that in our places of mourning and sadness and grief. God meets us in that place. And he doesn't abandon us, and we believe and trust, restore us to a place of joy, to a place where we can laugh again, right? Like there's nothing, you've seen people go through a grief where they are just in a season that is awful, where laughter feels impossible. And then, maybe a year later or whatever, God has brought them back to a place where they can be filled with joy, where they can laugh, where they can enjoy life. And it's like, that's an amazing thing.
It is.
Yeah.
One requires the other.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my very first preaching professor in seminary, at the beginning of one of his books, tells the story of a funeral for I think it was his niece, like just devastating. This child who's died, and he tells the story of going to the graveside, and the minister preaching the graveside sermon didn't reference the death of Jesus, the deep sadness at the death of his niece, and the grief and mourning, the lament that was required in that moment to enter into collectively. It was only resurrection, joy, heaven, all that's before us, for what is waiting on the other side. It was entirely dismissive in the way my prof would recount it, dismissive of the lament. And so
disembodied of the reality.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can't skip. It's like why on Easter, like we will never, like as long as I'm a pastor, I will never do like the whole Easter Sunday services on Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Nope.
Because Easter Sunday doesn't happen without the waiting of Saturday and the death of Friday. And so you have to move through those movements. And the reason why we do it year after year after year,
even though we know the outcome,
even though we know where it's going to go, is because we are practicing the discipline of lament.
Yes.
And then we are practicing the discipline of waiting. and then we are practicing the discipline of celebration. And that movement is what's going to pop back up when you're in seasons of grief. You're like, oh, I know how to do this. Yeah. It feels more real now, maybe like immediately pressing, because this is a death that affects like emotionally, physically, mentally, like spiritually, all of it. You're like, you're confronted by it. But my hope is that you know those disciplines, the discipline of lament, the discipline of waiting, and then the discipline of celebration. You're like, I've got the steps, I've got the map, I've got the path forward, and I don't like it, but at least I have some reference for this. Yeah. So it's necessary.
That's good. That's good. There are so many questions that our community Bible study came up with, and so many questions that we had, and so many questions that didn't make its way into your sermon. But that's kind of the beauty of this, is that 10 years from now, when this passage comes up again in another time for you, like there is an endless amount of paths we could go down. But for now, probably feels like a good place to close out. Yeah. And just to remind you that we are doing this community Bible study on Wednesday nights, if you're watching this in real time. And so this is a fun month where we get to have this, 100 people talk about the passage and then preach on it, and then kind of do any little cleanup on the next day or the next week for the podcast. So we get to really entrench ourselves in the text, which is a lot of fun. But if you do have more questions relating to the upcoming passage, and this upcoming week is going to be a lot of fun as we talk about Jesus' call to love our enemies. So I have a feeling there's going to be some hardball questions, which is going to be great. But for now, we'll leave it there, and we'll see you next time.